Got it. Okay, shall I start? Okay, so thank you again for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be a two-year member of Writers in Kyoto, and I've been able to attend quite a few of the other speakers' talks, which have usually been, not usually, always been illuminating. And today it has become my turn to speak. So nice to see some friendly faces, some that I know well, some that I don't know so well. What I'd like to do is start with I prepared a short PowerPoint thing, about 20 slides. I could speak for 20 minutes on each slide, but I'll try to speak like 10 or 15 seconds on each slide and just go through them so that you see my background. And after that, I'll elaborate and we can ask questions. If you have a question about one of the slides, maybe make a note would be the best thing to do, or put it in the chat and somebody can read it to me later. So without further ado, I would just say that one caveat about some of the pictures for the old days is that this is the way it used to be. I've been at it same as Stephen since the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, and in those before the bubble era, when it was the bubble era, and that the first half of the slideshow will sort of cover that work, how I got to where I am now, and the fact that I'm still thinking, what am I going to do to continue? Okay, so I'm going to attempt to share my screen. There it is. Share the screen. 1 minute. Oh, there it is. Screen. Okay. Does that work? Everybody see? Okay.
Looks good.
So, writing organically with inspiration of the seed, one of my standard catchphrases. And what does it really mean? I'm not really sure, but I write mainly from inspiration. I don't think I've written an outline for a piece since my university thesis paper, where you were required to write an outline. Even my books, all my essay books and memoir books I just wrote a bunch of essays, and then they slowly found their place and got pieced together. I have to give credit for the Japanese editors of that book who got me on the right track. First byline, write what you know, write what you experience. This is a translated book, the collected works of called Nature Meditations. And I helped with the translation, and I wrote the introductory commentary, and then in the back there was a sort of guided meditation that I also wrote. So the very first thing that I would say I got published, besides some minor magazines, like there was one called Hikari and Insights. Some of you may have known them, done by Connie Hernandez and Marcel Hernandez, who lived in Tokyo. So eventually, after 8 years in Tokyo, I moved out to the countryside, and this house was the 24-hour-a-day, 7-day a week studio where we published many books. It's also the sorry, I'm having a hard time to see. I can't see everything I wrote on the slide. And it's also where I started writing haiku and doing pinhole photography. And it's the source that, if you've read my book, you know it's the source of many of the essays in my book and many of the haiku. So these are some of the traditional books that I did. First credit must be given to my wife, Tsuruta Shizuka, because she had a long track record as a writer before we got involved. The book on the very left, Mother Earth Kitchen, was the first book that we did together. And after that, we did many more books. These are just a sample of these books. There's an interesting story about how after Mother Earth Kitchen got published, that I went to New York and tried to sell it as an American book. I won't go into it right now, but I will go into it later if somebody reminds me. So, starving artist, don't give up the day job, a question mark. So we were lucky enough, blessed enough that we were able to basically sell our lifestyle. Now, she's a guy who's a professional, she's not a professional cook. She happened to be interested in vegetarianism herself. And so that became one of our main topics. We lived in the countryside, and there were not that many people in 1988 living in the countryside. The caveat is now there's tons of people doing it, and we've gone by the wayside. That also will be commented later. And we did, using the base of that house and our new house, we did many magazine stories. This was all with, I can't forget which magazine this was, but in Japanese, they call it the Rensai. It's a monthly column. Some of them lasted for a year. Sometimes they went for 2 or 3 years. And, you know, again, the text is by my wife, Shizuka, and photos were by me. This is where I currently live, Solo Hill Garden, Solo Hill and House and Garden, and the home of Solo Hill Books, my self-publishing imprint that I have created. Not really created, it's just really a name. And one more view. If you can see, as I mentioned, when we lived in the old country house, it was a studio pretty much 24/7. And where we live now, it's still kind of like that. If you see the building on the left is what we call the living zone, and the building on the right is the work zone. So our offices and my studio and the gallery where I'm sitting, I don't know if you can see is right under here, the very end. And there's a little bridge and a deck connecting them, which at the end of the session, if we have time and you want to hang around for 5 minutes, I'll try to walk around with my computer and show you later. So these are some of the books that we did at our new house. When you can see the house was still new. It's gotten quite dirty and ugly. Actually, it's a book about how the house was built and all the little episodes and whatnot. Again, the text is not by me, but I picture, let's see, I'm prominent in the essays because we're a team. This is a column that I did for ANA's Wingspan, which was actually a quite plum job, I guess you could say, pun intended. It lasted for 56 issues, nearly 5 years. Being able to have the photos and the writing skills and Shizuka's recipes helped me get to this job. There was another well-known editor for Wingspan who told the editor, oh, I wanted that column. But she said, no, you don't have the photos and you don't have the recipes or something like that as well. So I got the job, and it was quite nice. The only problem was I hope to make this into a book someday, and I may still, but it's slightly edited into in-flight magazine lingo, and I think I'd have to get permission because it was worked on by other people and it was commissioned by other people. So it's still possible, I think, to make it into a book. But all the photos are originally on slide film, and it would take a lot of work to get everything coordinated and together, but maybe. Oh, speaking of Wingspan, this is the last big story that I did for Wingspan way back. It started back in 2016. This also comes up to the topic of what I call double dipping or triple dipping, which means this was in Tokushima, washi paper-making factory. I wanted to go to the Japan Writers Conference, which was in Tokushima. So I contacted the magazine and said, how about a story from Tokushima? And they said, well, if you do 2 stories, yes, we'll give you an air ticket. So I did this story and one other story. And a small Kyoto connection. This is the Awagami paper factory in I forget the name of the town. Now suddenly I forgot the name of the town, but Mr. Suzuka Yasu, my old friend, pinhole artist and old Kyoto hand, was the person who introduced me to. I met him one day by coincidence. at the photo museum. And I said, I'm going to Shikoku, to Tokushima. He said, oh, you should go to Awashima and, do something there. So thanks to him, it was a good connection. Kyoto Journal. Everybody knows Kyoto Journal. Many thanks to John Imerson, Ken Rogers for using this particular photo on the cover of issue number 34. Now they're up to 101, I believe. So it was in 1996, just after all these books that I'd done with my wife. We sort of got burned out on doing these books, and I got more into my artwork and writing haiku and doing the pinhole photography and doing exhibitions. And this is a particular Japanese magazine, Rensai column, that came about due to having a photo exhibition. So this is something I'll talk a little bit more about later, but having the photo exhibitions is a way to get jobs. Someone comes and saw the photos and they said, we have a new magazine coming out. We'd like to have you do a column on nature and healing, something like that. So this lasted about 2 years. I didn't write in Japanese. I wrote this one in English, and my wife did the translation, but it was a nice paid job. The problem is that it was before its time. The magazine was before its time. And okay, next. Now we get into a little bit of book publishing. This is traditional book published by Nippon Camera, the publishing company that publishes a very famous Japanese camera magazine, which last year they went under. They went belly up and closed. I now have the remaining 300 copies of this book are now sitting at my house being sold at a heavily discounted price. So, but it's a really nice hardback book. That was my first real photo book, which was a pleasure. 2006. This was my first book with Iwanami Shoten. It was based, the way some of these jobs came up was that the editor at Iwanami Shoten, who my wife and I had worked on several books earlier, had been looking at my website, and he said, I really like your work, but he was also impressed. I had a student's photo gallery from my workshops on my website. He said, I'm really impressed with your students' photos. Why don't we do a sort of how-to book, which I don't call it how-to, I called it a why-to book. Why bother to do pinhole photography? So there's a lot of philosophy and stuff like that. The English title comes out, Edo's Lessons in Pinhole Photography for Slow Life. So this was kind of direct, trying to get onto the slow life bandwagon. It's now out of print. I don't think there were maybe 2,000 or 3,000 copies printed in the first place, but it's a nice fancy A5 hardback book, which led to the second book, which was called Boku no Uekata, the one on the left, which was done by the same editor. And when I finished the pinhole book, he said, you're really a good essayist. I hate to say it, but that's what he said. You're really a good essayist. Do you have any more essays? And I had like maybe 2 or 3 that I'd started writing of my life in Japan. And he said, well, yeah, these are good. Let's see some more. Let's do a book of your essay of your life in Japan. And thus that book on the left was born, and then it was reinvented as the English version. It had to be rewritten almost complete, not completely, but all the essays are the same, but it needed to be rewritten for the English-speaking audience, where you need to explain what is giri ninjo and what is a kotatsu, or something like that, where of course in the Japanese book that was not necessary. So we go back, and this is, we're just going chronologically in case you couldn't catch that. This is another very small A5 size photo book. This was the first book I decided to publish on my own. And the reason was because I was having a big photo exhibition sponsored by the Month of Photography Tokyo 2017. So I thought I'll make a little book and just sell it really cheap. And I managed to make it so I could sell it for 1,000 yen. I don't know if any of you know Joe Zangi and Printed Matter Press in Tokyo. This book was designed and printed done by Joe Zangi and myself. That was it. And it was printed in a small, what do you call it, Stamachi downtown printing shop that Joe Zangi had been using for 30 years in Tokyo. And this one is also now, there's only like 10 copies left. I think we printed 200 copies. This is my book photo, Balloon on Fire. It's haiku and photos. So it's more a haiku book than a photo book. There's just some photo illustrations. It's in black and white. The quality of the printing is not very good, unfortunately. That was sort of a gamble, and I would say the gamble in a way failed. But it's done by CyberWitNet, which is a legitimate publisher online, but some people may call it a vanity press. Some people may call it a way to get your book published without having to do a whole lot of work on your own. There are no production costs at all for the artist, but you need to buy any number of books, the books that you want. This first batch of books I bought at retail cost. The second batch of books, he gave me a huge discount. But I was not satisfied with their designing skills, and I ended up designing the whole book myself, basically, and just working back and forth with them. As you can see, the inside pages, I decided to have 3 different formats. This is 3 different pages. I'm not sure if you can see the difference, but sometimes just 1 haiku and 1 photo. Sometimes there was 2 haiku and 1 photo. Sometimes there were 2 pages with just poems and no photos. This was my decision. I've been called on it since by some reviewers who thought it should just be more white space, just 1 haiku and 1 photo per page. I may reissue it. And the one thing about the CyberNet the copyright remains with me, and I have permission to republish it in any form at any time with the same name and everything, all on my own without any permission or anything necessary from them. So I may redo it sometime with a better Japanese quality printing and maybe reformat a few things. 2000 up to 2019. This was also my 40th year, celebrating my 40th year in Japan. I had a big photo exhibition again at Olympus Gallery in Tokyo. And so I decided the theme of that exhibition was Spots of Light, the big book on the left. And the 2 books on the right were from photo exhibitions in the past, but I never made a book of them for some reason. I didn't have any sponsor, or there was never any time. It was always like last minute getting to the exhibition was done. So I never made the books. So I found these were done print on demand, working with a fine art photo gallery in Tokyo with the director, someone I've known for 30 years. And he and I worked on the books together, the design and the layout, and everything was bilingual. And you can, financially, the deal was, there was no cost for me except buying the books. And the requirement was that you needed to, in the beginning, you needed to purchase 30 books. And then after that, you could purchase 1 at a time or 10 at a time, 5 at a time. So I think it was a fairly good deal. The problem is that they're print on demand, and so they're expensive, more expensive than if you're doing offset printing, and they're photo books with good, they're not like Amazon books with just a lot of text, which you can produce cheaply. The photos are produced 6-tone liquid something. They're digitally printed, but they're quite nice. But the Spots of Light is like $35, and the hardback small Mind Games is like $40. The smallest one is $30. So they're for people who really want to buy, like collecting photo books. But I'm glad I did it. And I will tell you about how the sales went later. And at that photo exhibition, as I mentioned before, photo exhibitions often generate jobs, even if I don't sell prints. This was from Ikebana International. Stephen, I'm sure, knows that the same editorial office that handles the ANA English magazine also handles the Ikebana International magazine. And so the people from MacEdit came to my photo exhibition, and about 3 weeks later, she said, "We want you to give you." They gave me 2 jobs in the Ikebana International magazine. So this particular one also, this is an online published article that was paid work, and this is one that also came about after the after having a photo exhibition. The Japan Economic Federation, who had interviewed me before, when Whisper of the Land came out, they did an interview piece with me, sponsored by Julian York of New Zealand, organized an interview piece with me. So I became friends with the editor, the head editor there, and he commissioned me to do this article about haiku. It was a lot of work. I mean, I had to do a lot of research, and because it's not only my haiku, but there's a Basho and other modern haiku poets. It's a quite good piece. You can find the link on my website. It's quite an interesting read, if I say so myself. This is the last one, the last slide. And I put this up there because this is a story that I tried in vain to sell through traditional publishing venues. Originally, it was done with publishing it in the ANA in-flight magazine as a travel story to France. And for most of those stories, unless it's a front of the magazine, 15-page feature, the shorter pieces in the back are not guaranteed. They're usually done on speculation. And so they're always interested if you can get good pieces. And I got some really good photos, and I wrote a really good story. Unfortunately, the editorial office, Mark Davis, stopped working with ANA just around the time when it was kind of like the last chance for this article to come out. So it never came out. It never saw the light of day with the ANA. And I did for about a year, I would say 2 years. I sat on it, and I did some internet research, and I queried some places just out of the blue, places I didn't know, travel sites and travel magazines. I never got one reply. And I sent the same query letter like 2 or 3 times to the same person. So I finally, what's the word? Not bit my pride, but just sort of ate my pride, or whatever you call it. And I just said, I'm just going to publish. It was fall. It was time to do it. I published it on my blog. I shared the link on Facebook and my newsletter and various places. And people were so happy to see the article, and they enjoyed the piece so much. So that will lead me in a little bit into my discussion. But this one is also, you can read on my blog. I think it's not on the top. I think it's the second from the top at the moment. It was in September 21. So actually, I published it to 21, and I did the story in 2017. And after 3.5 years, almost 4 years of not finding anywhere to publish it, I bit my tooth. I can't think of the correct expression, but anyway, I decided to just let it out there and not sit on it anymore. I said, I'm getting too old for this query business. So, and with that, I'm going to end my screen share. And I'm going to go to full screen here so I can see everybody. And I can see, I can only see, maybe Lisa, maybe you have me pinned. It's okay, which is fine. What's the time? I'm sorry, I don't have how much time did I lose?
It's only 11:30, and
Ed,
I just took off the spotlight, so if you re-click on gallery, you should be able to see everybody.
Okay, well, I'm good either way. And then I will leave it to the personal people. If they want to look at me big, they can. Gallery, wait a minute. Oh, how come I can't get the gallery to come up? I can only see you, Lisa. Wait a minute. Oh, I see the view. There it is. Sorry. Okay. So I just have a few notes. Why don't I read my notes first, and then we'll open it up for questions. Really simple stuff. You know, when I was preparing this lecture, talk, sharing, whatever you want to call it, it was about a month ago. I had a job in Tokyo, and so on the way to Tokyo, I get 2 hours on the train. That's good, and I pulled out my little notebook, and I started scribbling down my wiki talk notes, and time went by. I got busy with a lot of things, and I had no time to enter it into the computer. And then last week, I finally had enough time to find the photos that I planned to use while I was making these notes. Basically, it was a live history of what I just showed you. So I just picked up a few of the keynotes last night at 9 o'clock at night and wrote them down bigger so that I can actually see them without putting my glasses on. So the food lifestyle books. About the food lifestyle books, it's really what it got me doing those books all those years. Of course, the money was, I guess you could say the money was good. Yeah, the money was good. It was good enough that we lived in an old farmhouse for 16 years while we were making most of those books. And we were paying 25,000 yen rent a month for the whole house. And so we had a very, very low overhead. So even at the same time I was doing various jobs and teaching and lecturing and whatnot, we kept a low overhead. And so we were able to make some profit, I guess, on those books and save up money. I mean, there were actually real royalties, you know, coming exactly from the books. And we were able to save our money to eventually buy our own land and build our house that we live in now. Of course, we didn't have any money left after we did that. But so, sorry, the lifestyle books is really what got me attuned to the four seasons, the way the Japanese people see them, the Japanese aesthetic of seeing the season. My wife is Japanese, in case you haven't caught that by now. And, you know, so she says, it's such and such a month. We need pictures of such and such a flower. So I only know the names of the flowers in Japanese. Half of them, I don't know the English titles at all, the English names of the flowers. You know, what's that purple flower out in the field? And I would go out and crawl around in the grass and take the pictures as the wife ordered me to do. So, but these things got me attuned to the Japanese rhythms. You know, we don't want to get into the cliche saying, oh, Japanese seasons are the Japanese seasons and only the Japanese people can feel them. That's kind of been a thing now that people are kind of bashing on the internet a little bit. So, but for me, it helped me to understand it the way the Japanese people see it and the way the editors see it. We would pick the photos for our monthly columns. And so then I knew that, you know, in March, you need nanahana, you know, rape flower seeds, or of course, in April or May, you need your cherry blossom festival. Then you need your hydrenia, et cetera, et cetera. Writing organically, I've already covered that one. Washi story, Rensai, okay, yes. The older stuff from the 90s, from the 80s actually, but in the 80s, the 90s, early 2000s, the bubble area stuff, it might not be the way that it works today. It was very easy in those days to, I mean, if you were an extrovert like I am, it was quite easy to go into Tokyo to the publisher, call, you know, a week ahead of time and say, can I come in and show you my work, whether it's your writing or your photos? Sure, come on in, you know. It was fairly easy. Not like New York where it's not that easy. And of course, then my wife had her own track record. So if you notice on the slides, it said commissioned book publications. These are actually the publishers coming to her and say, we want you to do a book on Japanese wildflowers. We want you to do a book on wildflowers, flower arrangements. So those came to her. And just one thing to connect to one of our previous talks. the editor from Tuttle, who talked to us, and he happened to mention that Ikebana books sold well. So the Ikebana book that we did way back in the 90s, actually last year I did made an official queries submission. And I queried, I can't remember his name, the gentleman who talked with us, but I did the query with him. They kept the book for about a month and ended up, he decided that it was not right for them. He said it was a really lovely book. He just said, I don't think we can do it justice marketing and commercial wise. And so he said we passed. I was just as glad, but I did give it the try because I had attended the Writers in Kyoto meeting, and I thought I should try to, use that connection. Yeah, so the work that we did in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, it may not be valuable today, but I hope that it's still adaptable to the world that we face today in the writing, to get your work out there, to try to query people. If you have a way to do a public, if you happen to be an artist who does some art as well as writing, it's a way to get your writing known, is to combine it with your art in a public space or something, and you leave your flyers, your name card. And speaking of exhibitions, I'll go ahead and say that now. The exhibition where I published 3 self-published photo books. The exhibition lasted for 6 days. It was in the center of Tokyo in Shinjuku. And they had a counter on the doors. There was more than 1,000 people came in the door in 6 days. And I had 6 books on the table by the entranceway, 6 books, photo books and Whisper of the Land and my Balloon on Fire. And so 6 books on sale, and I sold 73 books in 6 days, which is quite good. And unfortunately, the profit was about 10,500 yen was my profit. So in fact, the gallery was nice enough to say, you don't have to give us any percentage of the book sales, because they knew that I was not making any money. Of course, that means that I was physically in the gallery every day, and all the books were signed. And if people wanted a custom inscription, I did that. And I did a little sales pitch. Well, if you like this one, you might like this one too, etc. I gave a few away to the editor of the AMA magazine. I gave them a copy. I didn't sell it to them. So you have to pick and choose what you can say. It's also for the old days. I never kept a journal my first 8 years in Japan, basically because I was just too involved with trying to learn a living and trying to learn Japanese, and I was teaching English part-time, and I was a Japanese gardener. I was doing a whole lot of things. Never occurred to me to write anything down. Luckily, I have a good memory, and now I can still, in Whisper of the Land, there are memories and essays written that cover the 80s when I was first in Japan. So, okay, sidebar. You want to hear the sidebar about the trip to New York? Or shall we skip that? I think it might be helpful, because if you're living in Japan or Australia or somewhere and you say, well, I want to take my book to New York and try to sell it, how are you going to do that? I actually tried it. The most colorful book that we have, I don't have it on the screen now, Mother Earth Kitchen. It's got the nice green rice paddy and the farmhouse on it. Really nice cookbook, and all the photos are done out in nature. Nobody did cookbooks like that in those days. And the food was, let's say, 75% Japanese, more like an international kind of cooking. So I did all my query letters beforehand. I didn't get any appointments. I was near New York, and I was at my sister's in New Jersey. I had nowhere to, well, I don't know if I should go to New York or not. I don't have any appointments. Finally, I got one appointment. I said, I'll be there tomorrow. I jumped on the bus that night. I got to New York. I stayed at a friend's place. And while I was there, so I got about 3 or 5 appointments with some famous St. Martin's Press. And it was more photo-oriented books that I was going towards, but cookbooks and things. So I went to them, and then people looking at my books. Wow, these are really nice. This food looks like it was cooked for the camera, cooked to be eaten? I said, yes, of course. What do you mean? And they said, well, because in those days, people's photography is not like the, Instagram kind of photo. That was like, studio with glycerin and stuff painted on the food and stuff. And our food was actually taken, she's cooked it as if we're going to eat lunch. We took it out in the garden, put it on the table, took a picture with a tripod and reflectors and all that stuff. So anyway, long story short, St. Martin's Press was interested in it and kept the book and all the paraphernalia accompanying stuff for a year or so. It was a couple of years. I kind of gave up, and then finally the lady sent me the package back after much consideration. We're sorry, but the point of the story is that while I was in New York for a week trying to sell the books that Shizuka and I had done, she was in Japan minding the fort at her house. And when I came back, we had 3 commissioned books to do in Japan. So it's kind of like seek and you shall find. If you build it, they will come. That was a popular phrase at that time. So it just happened in New York, and getting any of our books published in English just went by the wayside. I never tried again. Okay, let's see. Last 2 more comments. I sell the majority of the books on my, or we already did that one. And we already did that one. Okay. The SNS has seldom generated any book sales. Seldom. I mean, if you call 1 or 2, I don't call that a lot of sales. So same goes for my mass emailings. I have a Japanese mailing list with like 700 people on it who get my quarterly or trimester, three times a year email newsletter, which I spend a lot of time working on. It looks really nice. About 700 and some people on the Japanese list, and more than 400 people on my English list. If you're not on my list and want to get on it, send it out about 3 times a year. But the point is that I rarely sell any books that way. I occasionally get a job. I mean, I occasionally sell 1 book. If the book has just come out, maybe I'll get 5 sales. If it's a book that came out 2 years ago, and I'm saying, hey, these books came out 2 years ago, here's a reminder of this book, Timescapes Japan. Now I have 300 copies. I don't put that on the website, but there's 300 copies sitting in my downstairs. I'm selling it for 2,000 yen instead of 3,000 yen. And if you buy a set of those 3 new books, which I'm selling as a whole set for 10,000 yen, I'll throw in Timescapes Japan for free. I haven't had any takers. So that's my experience with online marketing. Maybe I'm not diligent enough. I have gotten a job maybe or 2 because people on my mailing list are people that I haven't seen for a couple of years, 4 or 5 years maybe. And they say, Edo, yeah, he's still alive. Oh yeah, he's got some good stuff. Let's see if he's got anything we can, let's ask Ed to do a cover for the Ikebana magazine or something like that. So it's kind of hit and miss. That's all I can say on that. I'm sure most of you have seen my newsletter. I do get feedback from people. Wow, beautiful photos. Thank you for sending that out. I enjoyed it, reading all your news. So it's PR. It's self PR, basically. Next page. Sounds like, what's that guy on the radio? Page 3. Howard, what's the guy's name? Anyway, okay, last thought. How bad do we want to spread our message and share our thoughts and our spirit with the world? That's basically what it boils down to me at that moment, at this time. If you have other work, a daytime job, I know some of you are university professors or retired professors or have another source of income, that's going to affect your decision, obviously. As a sidebar, many of you know that vagabond poet Sakaki Nao, who's one of my heroes, and I don't think he had a day job. I've only seen 2 or 3 of his books that he's published in English, so I'm not sure how many books he published in Japanese, probably not all that many. But I do know that he depended on a lot of people to support him. in various ways. So, I mean, he was a vagabond. That's what vagabonds do. They exchange their beings in exchange for a meal or a place to sleep or a place to stay or a woman to lay down with or whatever. So that was, being a vagabond was his day job, and he influenced a lot of people that he knew. So, I mean, whether you're a university professor or work in the technology industry, or I'm not sure what all of you do, but that's, I wouldn't necessarily quit it unless you have a cushion. I know, just looking at people's faces, I know that most of you or many of you are near my generation, and I feel at this stage that I'm not really up to writing query letters and doing it. I just, if somebody finds my work and thinks that it's worthy, and I've got my track record, if someone wants to go to the trouble and find me and ask me to do something, which they do sometimes, then I'm more than pleased to do it, even if it's something out of my genre that I'm not usually comfortable with doing. Okay. Last one. Okay, I promise this is the last one. Will I publish a new book of essays or new book of poems or haiku in the future? Probably, with my own imprint, most likely. I hope so. I imagine it'll be under the Solo Hill Press title, even if I have a sponsor or print on demand. Or, by the way, if you think you can sell a lot of copies, it's much better to go with offset printing. I almost forgot the word because nobody uses it these days, but that little book, Moments in the Light, originally we were going to do print on demand, and he'd already ordered the paper because it's photos, so it was like glossy paper. Now we had trouble because the printing, POD printing machines would not print it correctly. We were getting lines on the photographs. So I said, what's plan B? He said, we've got to go with print, offset printing. That's the only way then it's going to come out looking good. So we printed maybe 400 copies, I think, 300 or 400 copies. But because we did it print on demand, one copy was costing me about 800 yen. So I could sell them for 1,000 yen, which is really cheap. And as a gift, I could give them away, and it felt really good. Whereas the print on demand, Whisper of the Land, part of that was printed. The first batch of those, maybe I should talk just briefly about print. What's the time? Fine Line Press, the way that worked was that Fine Line Press designed the book. The two editors there worked diligently with me. We got a really nice book. They hired a really nice designer who put all these nice little flourishes in there to make it look like a real, as someone said, your book looks like a real book rather than just sort of something that came out of Amazon, which I took as a compliment. And I think the designer at Fine Line Press should take that as a compliment as well. Being as they're in New Zealand, there was the logistic problems. So the plan was that the books that I would try to sell myself through my routes and sell in Japan and sell in USA, etc., Europe, we would print in Japan again. I got them printed. So they sent me the finalized PDF, the printable version, and they said, you can take this. And he recommended who to take it to. We went with Printed Matter Press, which is in Tokyo, Joe Zangi, who helped me before. The first run we did with 350 copies. And so he printed them. He did the math and he said, it's much cheaper this way. And the books came out nice. And it ended up being about 880 yen per book. So again, that's cheap enough. I can give writers in Kyoto a reference copy. I can give to people who when necessary. But when the first round of books ran out and I ordered a second, I needed to get a second. I need more. So well, 350, that's probably a lot. Let's order 100. So we had to go with print on demand. So the quality of the book is almost exactly the same, but the price was about 1,100 yen per book. So it retails for, depending on where you buy it, anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 yen is the retail price. So there's a small profit. And it's still reasonable enough that if you need to give away review copies or something, it's possible to do it. So these are things that to think about. If you're going to print 500 books right off the bat, doing it print on demand, offset printing is most likely the way to go. If you have a place to store the books, and if you do lectures, as I mentioned, now most of my book sales are at not only photo exhibitions, but live events when I do lectures or conferences, the Japan Writers Conference, etc. You know, they have a table where people are selling their books. You don't sell a lot of books, and you have to sell them at a discount usually, but those venues, no offense, but at the Zoom meetings, maybe I'll get one sale later from someone who happened to catch my Japan Writers Conference talk or my Writers in Conference talk, which is fine. That's no problem. But that's just to say. So that's all my notes. Lisa, I don't know if anybody, I think there's 12 questions in the chat. Does somebody want to ask those questions, or?
We do have a number of questions. We can take them in
order. I can't
order.
hear you, Lisa.
Can
maybe I might.
Sorry, can the rest of you hear?
My speaker went to sleep. Sorry.
Okay, we do have some. Maybe I'll just take them in order. The first one is, you've touched on it somewhat. It's from John. Impressive creative output. How much time and effort goes into promotion?
Promotion, not enough. Not enough. The newsletters take a lot of work, but I found out that the fastest way to do my newsletter is actually I go back look at my Facebook feed and my web page, and I just sort of copy and paste everything into a newsletter template. I'm using MailChimp, which is a rather easy to use thing. So basically everything is nicely formatted, and I just go through my website. I have a news page on my website, so I just go through and pick up the news for the last year or the past exhibitions or upcoming. Usually stuff is posted on Facebook or my website before it gets into my newsletter. So the newsletter is sort of a compilation of those things. So it's fairly quick. I do it about 2 or 3 times, but I also do them bilingually, so it's twice as much work doing it bilingually. But for me, my fan base is actually bigger on the Japan side than the English side. So, okay, shall we go to the next question?
Let me skip to the last one, actually, because it ties in there. So Rebecca asks, do you or your wife do your own JE or EJ translations?
Yes. I help her with, when she has to write something in English, I'm her final checker. She had a column with the Japan Times for 1 or 2 years doing a food column. And she was determined to write the columns in English. And then I would check them and try to leave her a little bit of her natural Japanese feeling in there. The original version of Whisper of the Land, the original text was written in English with knowing that it was going to be translated into Japanese by my wife, who knows me well enough that she should know what I'm talking about, but she doesn't have the same spiritual attunement. So I was like hovering over her shoulder to checking things, confirming things. And then there was the editor at Iwanami Publishing was a man who had known me for 10 years. So then he had put the female bent on checking the translation, etc. When we did go to the Japanese English version, I had to do a lot of major rewriting. So I just wanted to, as we already mentioned, so did that. My haiku, Japanese haiku, basically I write the Japanese myself, but it needs to be checked by my haiku sensei, which is most of the time my Shizuka, who says, yeah, there's a better word for this. There's a nicer word for this. I'm getting better at it, but the inspirations most of the time come in Japanese, and I write them down and then come up with English. and then come up with better Japanese. So does that help? A lot of yelling back and forth across the office. What's the word for that? You know, so it's a circus. Next, okay.
Thanks. So John wants to know, and so do I, do you have to pay galleries when you have an exhibition? I was wondering about, yeah, if you have a photo exhibition, how do you go about finding a place to have it and what's involved?
I don't pay, no. There are two systems in Japan for galleries. One is the gallery rental system, which maybe, I'm sure Stephen is probably familiar as being a photographer, he knows the options, but there's what they call in Japanese, they call them the maker galleries, which mean Canon has a gallery, Nikon has a gallery, Olympus has a gallery, Pentax has, they all have their own gallery, Sony has a gallery. And the process is that there's like a twice a year submission process window. And you have to have 40 photos. And even if you're a famous photographer, you still have to submit your stuff. And a jury looks at it and says, okay, we'll give you an exhibition. In theory, it's free. I think there's supposed to be a small charge for the room, but it's like 30,000 yen versus 300,000 yen if you rented a gallery in Ginza or something like that. In my case, they've waived. I've been lucky enough; they've always waived the fees because I get a lot of people in the door for them versus some other sort of amateur, so-called amateur or less well-known people. The other is the fine art photo galleries have two kinds of systems. One is the rental system. Each gallery rental and what they call in Japanese kikaku, which is the closest thing I've come up with it is a sponsored exhibition. The gallery pays for everything. There's no rental fee. They may pay for making the postcard, they may not. And they take, of course, a certain percentage of your sales, up to 50% of a sale of a print, maybe 20 or 30% or 10, 20, 30% of your book sales if you're selling books. So different, but I myself did not rent the gallery. It's sort of against my policy, mainly because I don't have the confidence to sell enough books or to sell enough of these fine art prints. If you sell 10 prints at 50 or 60,000 yen a print, then you'll get your money back. But if you don't, you're out of pocket. So it's like it'd be the same as a vanity press equivalent if you're renting a gallery. But it's like I say, it depends on how much you want to show your work. Okay, I hope that was not too long an answer.
All right, we have a related question from Rebecca, and then I'll go back to Jan and John, the ones that you just put in there. Okay, so do you find that when you go to galleries, it helps if they know your contacts or past work? So she says she had trouble with some places exhibiting her paintings because they wanted her to have some contact or be a member of a circle, etc.
Well, approaching galleries takes the research and the query work, the same as writing does. I mean, they're some really high, what I call the high nose, the highbrow photo galleries, you know, like the Soho area of New York kind of thing. Those exist in Tokyo, and they're like really. My friend calls, you know, where all the staff wear black all the time, and they look real official, and they have these really nice fine art photos on the wall, and you're really kind of intimidated if you go in there and you're not a buyer. But you have to go around and visit. I go around and visit the galleries, and I say, well, this is a nice space. And then I might stay around for a half an hour, see how much traffic they get, and it's sort of. If the owner or the director is there, if it's somebody I don't know, I will, as the director here, or sometimes they know me. I mean, sometimes I have to say that I walk in the gallery and they already know me. And I say, I'm up to no far, I'm Ed Levinson, I give my name and say, oh yeah, I know your work. I've seen your work at such and such a gallery. So that happens. Sometimes they know me, but they've known me for 20 years, but they've never offered me a show at their gallery. So it's kind of you need to do your, if you're up and starting, you have to, it's the same as with writing. You take your portfolio book, you walk around and knock on doors or make phone calls. I'm not exactly, they like to, I know that from my experience, they like to see real work. I've gone to the photo magazine and I mean, this is when I have an established record with the magazine, but I make prints of even if it's with a digital camera. I make printouts of 30 or 40 photos. We put them on the table and they look at them. And the guy, so this, and because the editors, some of them are old school. And the guy said, yeah, we have, I've had these, young kids, they come in and they just bring a CD or they bring a USB stick. Here's my work, will you look at it? And that's not really the way to do it. You should have a little portfolio book or a nice, if you do it online, you need to have a nice website with some link. Here's a sample to my work, and you send a query letter. So, okay, without going on forever, sorry.
All right, now we're going to go pick up Jan's question about promotion, kind of switching back, but still in the same track. So he says, thanks for your great presentation. How important is face-to-face promotion, would you say? Might it be helpful for someone like me who doesn't live in Japan to have a pop-up event in Kyoto, perhaps? And then let me go ahead, and John wrote a follow-up, so let me put that in at the same time. He asks, did you ever do cold calling to publishers without prior contact?
Okay, pop-up. I think a pop-up is a cool idea. I think I should do it. I used to make jokes when the Olympics were going to be held in Tokyo that summer. It kind of got squashed, but I thought maybe I'm just gonna, if I want to get rid of some of these books I've got laying around, I should go to Harajuku or Omotesando and put a blanket on the ground and just set up a booth guerrilla style and sell some books. I'm sure I'd sell more than I sell in a year online. So I didn't do it. Of course, the Olympics, that was not that atmosphere this time. Next year's, someone said, yeah, let's do that. Next year's in a Hokkaido or somewhere next time, or it's going to be freezing, and we're not going to do that either. But I think having some little pop-up event, live event, or if you can do it online, it's definitely a way. When I got a Zoom account, because I was volunteering for some poetry group to host their meeting, so I'll get the Zoom account for a year, thinking that I would do some bunch of Zoom events on my own, or she's would get online and do a talk, but she hasn't, and we haven't done any solo hill gallery tours or anything. So just because it's a lot of work, and you really need to have another person or two around to operate the camera and then everything to do it really right. So what was the other question? Sorry, the second part.
Do you do cold calling to publishers without having any prior contact with them?
I have, yes. I have, yes. In Japan, I've done it quite often, and in the States, yeah, I have done it. And sometimes calling is the only way, because even these people are really busy. If you send them a letter, they probably do get it and read it, whether it's on paper or email. But the gentleman from Stonebridge Press who talked to us, I queried Stonebridge Press before I queried Vineland Press, because that was sort of my first choice. And to be truthful, he never got back to me. And I won't go into that, but let's just say that, yeah, I did follow up several times and it never worked out. Sometimes I think it pays to call up on the telephone, especially if you're dealing with Europe. People in Europe are kind of, I had trouble with something in Europe. I was trying to get permission for something. I was trying to get permission to photograph at the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. And I sent all these letters, and I called the embassy in Tokyo. They said, just call them up on the phone, which I did. And in 10 minutes, they said, okay, and just commented, and it was done. So sometimes doing it on the phone is really the easiest way to do it. In Nippon Camera, where I went for many years, I would just call them up. It wasn't a cold call, but yeah, I've done cold calls, so I think it's worth it. If you're calling in Japan, it's definitely worth it.
All right, moving on. Jan would like to know, what price point that should you stay under to sell books? It sounds like 1,500 yen or so would be an upper limit, ? And she says she'd be happy to pay more, but then she's a book addict.
Well, most people, I believe, most of the people I know, Leanne, who you know, and Karen Hill, Anton, and several other people, most of their books are retailing for around 2,000 yen on Amazon. I'm not sure what the price is if you get it directly from them. I might be the same. On my book, Vineland Press, they had the Retail price is 2,000 yen, but we purposely did not, there's no price printed on the back of the book. It does have an ISBN number, but because of the rates for Australia and New Zealand and dollars and yen and euro go up and down so much, we found, it's my opinion, that it's better not to put the price on the book. Again, it depends on, you can, that's, even when I Whisper of Lebanon, I did get it in some bookstores. One was the ISU Book Center, which was quite nice. And it didn't have one of these little Japanese book slips that go in the book that's got all the info on it with the price and everything. But she said, okay, but it did have the ISBN number on it, which the publisher had organized. And so they made their own little tag to put in the book. And she said, what are you selling it for on your website? And I said, I'm selling it for, I forget what the deal. I think I said, I'm selling it for 1,700 yen. And so she said, and the retail is 2,000. I think she priced it at 2,000. I don't even remember the details. And they paid me 1,400 yen per book, which they didn't sell all the books, but that's another long story. The books, for those who live in Tokyo, Yaisu Book Center no longer has an English book section, which was really surprising. After 2 years, I went to check on my book and see what the status was, and the whole English book section is gone. So I said, where are my books? What happened to the books? And she said, the young man who's on the lady who I dealt with was off that day. The young guy said, oh, they're down in the basement of the bookstore somewhere. So I have to call another day when the manager is here. So I called a few days later, and she says, oh, we sold all the books to whoever they sell them to, the book wholesaler or the used bookstores or something. And he said, yeah, but you still have 4 of my unsold books. She said, we'll pay you for your books. So she said, send me an invoice. And she said, wait a minute, have the invoice, send me a copy of the invoice. And so they paid me 1,400 yen times 4 copies of the book. They only had 6 to begin with. So I sold 1 legitimately, and then the other 4 disappeared into the Ethernet, whatever you call it. And they paid me for them. So thank you for that. Book, so there is some, what do you call it? Still some pride, and that pride, some pride and goodwill left in in bookstores, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Did I answer the question?
Jan, about the price point?
So 2,000 yen, perhaps. It's just...
I think 2,000 for, if it's a book, depends on how many, the photo books that I self-published POD in 2019, in my opinion, they're too expensive. But it can't be helped. I'm making like 100 yen or something on a book. Sorry. Maybe someone else's mic should be muted. Anyway, I'm making about like 100 yen or something per book, which is very, I just rounded off the numbers. It's 3,500 yen, but it was actually 3,555 yen or something like that. I've rounded them off so that it's an even amount, and that I could sell the whole set for collectors of Edward Levinson photo books. They can buy the whole set for 10,000 yen, which is, in Japan, that's just one bill. It's pretty easy. I even set up the show where I sold 70 some books. I actually signed up for the Square. It's a thing where I can take a credit card on my iPad, so that if somebody showed up and they didn't have cash with them, that's all right, I'll take a credit card. Even now I still carry that little credit card thing around in my day bag, just in case I meet someone and they want to pay me some money. I can swipe their credit card. But so that's but for in the photographic world, that's not that expensive. 3,500 yen for a photo book is reasonable. 4,000 yen is reasonable for a nice hardcover book that's a sort of collector's item. It's reasonable price. And young people, people in their 20s and 30s were buying them. A young girl who's a photographer, I really like this one, I'm going to buy it. It's 4,000 yen book. She just bought it without thinking. So
So that leads us, some of what you're just saying leads us really well into John's question. He says he gets the impression that rather than social media, your force of personality has been the key to your sales of self-published books.
It is. Some of you know that, just going around to the Writers Conference, Japan Writers Conference. I'm not always a speaker, but I go. And sometimes I do something related to photography and writing. Sometimes I just do something related to writing. But during the in-between sessions, someone will come up and buy a book. Some of you, sometimes I'm pushy, I'll just look the person in the face and I say, you should read my book, because I can tell that there's a kindred spirit here. And, I'll make the book as cheap as I possibly can. And they'll buy it. One person is probably someone that some of you know, Warren Decker. I think some of you know Warren Decker. He's down in the Kansai area, a very good writer, and has become a friend. And so I said, you should read my book. And he bought it. I didn't give it to him. He bought it at the Japan Writers Conference. And he wrote me this really nice review. You can find it on my comments review page. So there's the bonuses. Sometimes you see somebody, you should read this book, you should buy this photo book. I mean, I do make suggestions based on the feeling or the vibration, if you want to call it that I get from the person who face to face. It's interesting that when I do this, the so-called Whisper of the Land lecture, where I do a lot of slides, and it's like a 2-hour session, speaking to some group, and there's like 100 slides, and I'm talking the whole time. When it's finished, I always sell all the copies of Whisper of the Land that I've taken with me, and there's almost always not enough. And then I have to just collect the money and send them the book later. So we're not talking about 100 books. We're talking I take 5 books that'll fit in my suitcase, and I get rid of them all. I don't sell the more expensive photo books, but now if it's on sale, maybe. So I hope it's not too honest and too brutal, giving away all the trade secrets,
That's what we're here for. Michael has a question about workshops. He says, your home has an amazing studio. What about running workshops reflecting Keep the Beauty that incorporate readings, photography, and gardening, marketed to the international community so as to establish organic growth rather than galleries?
Well, that's, like I said, taking on this, having a Zoom account for 1 year. I thought that would sort of help. This was, during the beginning of COVID, when nobody was going anywhere, and I bought the equipment to set up the camera and have, make everything look good, and bought a new Wi-Fi thing, so I'd have Wi-Fi all over the place. And I mean, it's possible to, as other meetings, for me to sit out in the garden and do broadcast. Something about it's a lot of work involved. I feel like if there was one more, excuse me, if there was one more person here, a young 20-something or 30-something person who would help with the technical part of that. We have had workshops here, physical workshops here in the past. My wife did a so-called Zemi, a seminar here, like once a month for a whole year. She had the same group of people that came, I think it was about 10 people. And they came once a month, mostly from Tokyo. One lady commuted from Osaka, from Saitama, other parts of Chiba, and they commuted. It was just a day-long event. And everybody cooked and ate lunch together. I led some meditation exercise in the garden. We sold some books. There was a little bit of creative time where somebody people wrote or did some drawing, and then some sharing. So yes, having some sort of physical creative workshop is sort of my dream. We've done it on certain levels. How it would work online, I'm not 100% sure that it would come out with the same feeling. At the end, if anybody has time, I am set up. I could walk around and show you my deck and just a quick view of the garden with my webcam and notebook, but maybe we can save that for another time. We've gone quite a bit. Did I answer the question, Michael? So, but it's my dream. We don't have any children. So part of our quandary these days is who's going to get all these so-called assets when we're no longer around. You know, all the not that the copyrights are worth anything, but I mean, we have like there's a for 40 years of photography and books and the copyrights of Shizuka's books, and there's this whole house. And so the idea is to set up a trust, or I like to call it the Solo Hill Creative Trust, and I have a residence in artist kind of place, as well as keep our, in the Japanese call it a kinenkan. I don't know what you call it in English, like that Edo and Shizuka Memorial House or something like that. Sounds a little, I don't want to go too far in that direction, but you know, to leave the gallery and the workspace, but to have it so that as a public space that people can enjoy. But while we're still alive and kicking, which is going to be for a long time still, to have it, we have had some what we call the Solo Hill open days, which is just one day. It's too much to be open all the time, you know, 5 days a week or even every weekend. So maybe 2 or 3 times a year, we would open up the garden, the house, the gallery, the deck, the whole thing. Maybe Shizuka would give a short lecture. I would give a short lecture. We might charge 1,000 yen or something, but because then COVID sort of put a damper on that, and maybe this end of this May, we may try to do it.
Sounds like something for us to look forward to.
And you know, in that case, it may be we could set up a live cam at the same time for people who came physically and people who couldn't be there physically. It's possible.
All right, let me ask you one. The last question is in the chat. We're going to make this our very last one. It should be a quick question, and then we can wrap up. So can you recommend any publishers? Let me scroll back to for someone who's thinking of publishing a book of photos and poems for the first time. Could you recommend any publishers? And would it be a good idea to first create the book and then show that to the publisher?
Are we talking about in Japan?
This is from James, by the way.
James. Oh, okay, so we're talking about in Japan. Well, I would say there are the two options that I know of. One is well, I don't want to waste time, but is the small book that I made called Made with the Fine Art Gallery in Tokyo. There's several galleries now that are offering sort of similar services. And the book service is offered by Dai Nippon Insatsu, which is, you know, one of the top printing companies, and they use what they call 6-color liquid tone printing. And when I made the book with, I don't think you can make the book with them personally yourself. I did it through a fine art gallery who I think has a contract with them. And he uses their software, but I sat beside him with his computer, and we sort of, you know, I prepared all the artwork to the specific proper printing dimensions, sent it to him, and I prepared all the Japanese text and the English text and sent all that to him, and he did all the cutting and pasting into the book format. It was quite complicated. A little bit complicated, but mainly because it was bilingual and the text was kind of small and hard to see. Even though he could read English, I had to do all the English proofreading, and there were 3 books going on at the same time. And so for example, the biography at the end of the book, one sentence had to be different in each book. So there are a lot of little things. The other book, the CyberNet in India is another way to go. I was not that happy with the quality of the production of the book, but I think if you pay for a higher quality of paper, then I think you can get a better thing. And again, the choice is you can let them design it. And if you don't like their design, you can say, well, how about do like this, do like that. And in my case, I ended up designing it, not with a book designer, but just in Word, Microsoft Word, and made it look kind of like a book. And I said, this is what I want it to look like. And he did the book conversion. So those are the 2 ways I did it, things that had photos and text poems together. I'd be happy to contact you, to chat with you later on that private, and even send you copies of the books and let you compare them. I could introduce you to to the guy who did the photo book, the really nice one. Problem was it was kind of expensive.
Right. Thanks, Ed. This was lovely.
Well, I hope it was on topic and that, you know, it was
Okay, Ed, that was
helpful.
fantastic, and
Wonderful presentation. Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't get my questions through. I haven't figured out how to type in
Oh.
messages. This is
Yeah.
my first Zoom session for me.
You want to ask a question? I mean, do we have
quick
time?
question.
I don't have my watch with me, so I don't know what time it is.
If there's time, I was just wondering, we could do a whole presentation on the art of the proposal. I know how I make proposals. I'm not sure if I'm on track or not doing that. I was just wondering how you make your initial proposals to new potential clients, how you sort of write and package and present your email or attachment files and so on.
Well, basically, I mean, I'm old school. You know, I follow the sort of standard query format. I think the shorter, of course, is always the better. But I think if they don't have if you send too many links, I think people don't click on the links. That's sort of the feeling I get. I mean, you don't want to send them 100 photos. The photos I link to, maybe I attach one or two of my favorite photos just to sort of whet the appetite. Maybe even a haiku or something, but you know, your short background, in your case, of course, you have a long track record. So I say it's pretty much old school and following any guidance or notes that I may have picked up looking at Google, how to query in the online era, you know, internet era. So basically it's the same. I think you do need to follow up though, because most people, they never answer, even if they get it. And sometimes I don't think they get it, or they get it and they don't open it, or they get it and they might read it. So I think you need to be persistent. And I think, I mean, a lot of people I've mentioned, but a follow-up phone call after 2 or 3 emails, I think, is perfectly polite enough. Because, you know, if you've sent them 3 emails and you still haven't heard from them, you can assume, one, they're not interested, which occasionally I do, but you can also say, well, I'm going to give it one more shot and call them. So it's.
I think I'm old school enough to feel slighted by the discourtesy of people not getting back to me.
Well, me too. You know, I feel the same way. Even, you know, there's busy people in New York. Once they saw me, they did sort of follow up, you know, and I'd almost like forgotten that I'd left the book and the proposal there, and I was assumed it was just dead, and I was happy they kept the book. She actually sent, I think she didn't keep the book, but she kept some copies or something, sent it all back to me in a nice package. So, you know, I think it depends on the person. Dealing with the Tuttle, who actually rejected my book proposal, but he and the female editor who he introduced me to, they were very prompt with the feedback, getting back to me. So they seem to be good. Stonebridge Press, it's my feeling that they're way understaffed. That's just the feeling that I got. And so that Peter does most of it, and maybe he can't keep up. It's not anything against him, but that's just a feeling that I got. And
yeah,
the person who introduced me there in the beginning said the same thing. Yeah, Peter's really busy. That's probably why he didn't answer email or something like that. But
yeah, I had exactly the same experience. I think that's very true. So different publishers react in different ways.
I know. So, I mean, they're
always talking about the slush pile being this high. So
in that case, I would think that the telephone is actually, you know, the most direct way to just get there, whether it's a landline or you know, using some sort of online calling service or whatever you use. But
okay, Ed, I think we're going to have to wrap up there.
Yeah, I think we used a lot of time. Thank you very much for being so patient.
Calling, but many thanks indeed for sharing all that information with us, and there were quite a few useful tips you gave.
Yeah.
And above all, I think your personality as a key factor in the success of your publications was very noticeable. So thanks very much for talking to us and sharing your experience. It was really helpful.
Oh, thanks for having me and getting me to sort of take a look back at my life through starting in the 1980s. And I don't know if anybody, if you're interested, I'll try to show you a bit of my garden, but just I think I can move easily. But I did do a test. That's why the camera was overexposed, because I set the exposure outside. But we can do it another time.
Yeah.
We'll do it another time. I'll do you when we have our open house.
Maybe we'll pool our questions and have another session in your garden.
I'm game
At home
anytime.
with Ed.
Okay, thanks very much to everybody for coming. It was really good, really productive, and exactly what I had in mind when setting up writers in Kyoto. Absolutely perfect. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed, very much.
Thank you for
Thanks,
coming.
Ed. Great day, everyone.
Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye.
Yeah, everybody.
Bye.